I mean, here you have like the dawning of what they call like the mass monster era, where you have the previous 8-time Mr. Olympia Lee Haney who's standing on the right, up and coming challenger Dorian Yates from Birmingham standing on the left, and of course I could sit and talk about like all of these competitions and uh, the judging and like who has the better body parts and so on. It's not as interesting as trying to discuss the cultural impact and how it changed going into the 90s,
It's
because
pretty
like
obvious from like just the pictures we saw, or just the video we saw from the Vince McMahon version, that something happened here, right?
yes, I
There's a
mean,
difference between Arnold and this, right?
yeah, I mean these guys are a little bit bigger. I think Arnold could, let's say he had a little bit more of the modern training equipment. Let's just say that he would have been able to compete in this era. But I mean, this is just kind of the start of the sort of new approach to the 90s bodybuilder, as I call it. And I would almost analyze it in the same way that you look at these other things that are happening from the 90s. Dorian Yates on the left there, he becomes a 6-time winner of the Mr. Olympia. And like I said, with the judging, there is a sort of conscious choice to choose his type of physique. If you go to the next picture, that's the 1992 to 1993 Dorian Yates,
Got
like where
freaking
you can see how
wings.
his
Look at that.
body develops in a sense. Like this guy is the sort of quintessential Generation X bodybuilder, like this kind of 90s. Like
Right.
what is the 90s about? It's about like the being extreme. It's about like this kind of nirvana, almost this kind of like life rejecting type of philosophy, where you go from basically the last champion Lee Haney, who is this more kind of all American. You live in California, you have the sunglasses, you sit on the beach, and they show off the cars and the bling and all of this sort of glamorous stuff to this guy who is like this guy from Birmingham that nobody's heard about. And he doesn't do any appearances outside of these contests. He's just in like this shitty gym in Birmingham, releasing black and white photos and trying to sell his training tape that's called Blood and Guts, where it's really just like the black and white photo imposed over him training. No, not sorry. I mean like black and white filter, right?
Oh, yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
so I mean, this is almost like black metal in a sense for bodybuilding. That's sort of how I look
Yeah.
at it,
Yeah.
because
I could see it. Yeah.
like with this guy, not only that he tried to train super intense and he pushed the boundaries with drugs as to how like bovine he could make his body look. Uh, he seemed to be getting uglier. Like if you look at the next photo from 1994, it's not in black and white. You have to zoom in a little bit. He now he's trained very hard and he's had injuries in his arms, right? So you can see in his right arm there's a sort of like cut off there in the
Yeah. Yeah.
bicep that
Yeah.
wasn't in the previous pictures. So both because of his like very intense training style and drug use, he's now like you see he's starting to have injuries, and his midsection is getting bigger. He's getting a more sort of blocky look.
Yeah. It's
Then
getting
if you
kind
look
of
at the
bloated.
the next photo from 1997,
The one where he's next to
yeah,
Nasser.
he's next to Nasser Elson body here, and like he won first place at this show, looking like this train wreck that he did, and that's why I call him like the black metal bodybuilder in a sense, because it seems like the shittier he looks, the better he seems to place, right? Or the more people like him, like, and you will see people on the internet, like in these comment sections on YouTube, that will defend him to the death, right? I mean, you look at this picture, like he's just being killed in this post by
Yeah.
Nasser
Yeah.
El Body, that it's just so clearly that he should
Obviously.
win this
Yeah.
one. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's completely obvious. He shouldn't be in the top 10. But you see people who would just defend this look to the death. Like they are absolutely loyal to this kind of cult of Dorian Yates or whatever it was. I mean, of course, he retired after this. I think he understood that it can't keep going on. But I just wonder how long they would continue to give him the Sandow Trophy, in a sense, because it seems to be almost just like grotesque for grotesqueness sake. And I mean, that might be kind of a weird take, but that's just how I sort of see this movement, where it's going from this, okay, yeah, we're going to do the glamorous, the sunglasses and the Rambo stuff, to this
Yeah.
extremely gritty, working class,
I'm just gonna get as big as
aggressive
I
stuff.
can.
And
Yeah.
yeah, get as big as you can. And that's, of course, the kind of movement that you see, let's say, with comic books and films in the 90s as well, like is something like Spawn and the Frank Miller's Dark Knight, and like
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
start having physiques that are like these kind of grotesquely over proportioned, over muscled bodies. Like if you think about Ben Affleck's Batman, for instance. It's very much
Yes,
modeled
yes.
after this kind of grotesquely over-muscled bodybuilder. So I mean, of course, I've skipped over a lot of stuff here. Nasser El Somebody, I don't know if did we get him in the intro? I think we
got him in the
yeah,
intro.
I think he was actually in one of these autism intro videos, right? So he's
Yes,
like
he was.
this sort of Yugoslavian bodybuilder who was really at the top in the 90s, and then he sort of fell off a little bit later. But I mean, I guess he's one of the more sort of memeable bodybuilders, because all of these people live of selling these training tapes, like these training videos. And like he just had this sort of personality where he was just kind of like brutally honest about everything. And he just like you said, he doesn't want to answer questions, or he will just tell people to fuck off and so on. But yeah, relatively, like, in a sane universe, he should have been an engineer or something like that. He's just way too smart to do this type of sport, and I think he felt very alienated.
And you kind of hear it when, just in that clip, for anyone who isn't aware of Nasser, you kind of hear it in that clip that we played at the start. The way he speaks is very intelligently, right?
Yes. But I mean, he was very disillusioned after this loss. I mean, he lost in yes, exactly. He was extremely disillusioned by it, and he could continue to compete, and then he died from a heart attack. I mean, I can't imagine why, right?
Yeah, wonder why.
Especially now, because I mean, these physiques are starting to look like this, and like it's like what I said earlier, people always trained hard, but there's a sort of change here, not just because, like, in the 70s, they were doing steroids. Like, they were doing a lot of these anabolic steroids that they could get in the pharmacies. But at this point, they've started to introduce other stuff, like other compounds, like human growth hormones, for instance, which is, I mean, it's similar to, steroids is mostly like different types of testosterone, like this kind of male sex hormone that already exists in the body, and you inject more of it. So it's like you're going through puberty, multiple times and getting these growth spurts. But human growth hormone just has completely different effects, right? It will grow like the entire body. So you'll see these guys who just get like bigger bone structures, and their faces get bigger, and their joints and so on will get bigger along with their muscles. And not only the growth hormone, but they start incorporating insulin. That's like this hormone that diabetics use, right? But they figured out that they could kind of stack growth hormone and insulin and different types of testosterone.
You're getting
and so
into like Warhammer 40,000 Birth of a Space Marine type of
yeah. I mean,
here.
I'm not even kidding. If you wanted to have this kind of look, not only the all of these things that they have to inject themselves with consistently, but to get into, like, to be this big and to get into this lean shape, they had to take a lot of other drugs to lose the fat, right, and lose the water. So they would use a lot of these a lot of these kind of diuretic supplements. So these diuretic drugs are just pills that they would take that would make them just urinate, right? And they would just like piss nonstop, almost until the point where until you're like pissing blood, basically, because there's no water left in the physique. And I mean, like, the best look that you're going to have is like straight before you pass out, and this is what happened to some of these guys, particularly in the 90s. I was
going to say a lot of them must have passed out on stage.
It happened, actually. So some people passed out on stage, and they had to be carried off. But that's kind of where the the sporting aspect of this comes in, where it's I mean, you could see that it's clearly a competition between people, and they're they're putting a lot on the line to do this, but it's so completely like alien and unapproachable to the regular person that I mean, it's only going to be for like these kind of hardcore fanatics at this point. But with the proliferation of the bodybuilding culture and gyms being available everywhere and the internet and so on, there's enough of an audience of people who are like these gym purists to want to watch this stuff now, right? I mean, that there wasn't in the past, but with the internet and so on, that's kind of how we get to this point. And of course, even after Dorian Yates, the sport sort of continues very much in this direction, right? It's this sort of, we just keep adding on more mass, and so the determining factor then it really falls down to like the genetics that you have. I mean, it sounds like a sort of a cop out, because there's a lot of hard work that goes into this, but you're going to be very limited in this sport if you if you're like genetically put together in the wrong way, or if you're not capable, say, of taking all the performance enhancers, if your liver can't
You're
stand
just
it,
gonna
or
die or get sick
yeah,
before you even get there. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So you need to be like a very particular specimen or very, very special type of person to want to do this. Not only that, but like the money isn't that great either. At least if you compare it to some other sports, like if you're like a top, American football player, soccer player, or baseball player.
Oh, right.
So so at least the sport sort of retains the idea of like muscles for muscle's sake, in a sense. You have to sort of
Yeah.
do it because you enjoy it.